Dear students, in this session, I would talk about the status of French language as a language of culture and fashion. I hope and expect that by the end of this session, you would be able to understand why the status of French language was retained only to, or it was restricted only to, as a language of fashion and culture during the 15th century and even after that. During the 15th century, when English language took over and French went out of use as a spoken language in England, not only it was its sphere that became more restricted in terms of use in everyday life and in the official language, but there were certain other reasons that played their role in changing the dimension of the use of French language. There were certain reasons that cultivated a change in terms of its new status, that is, as a language of culture and fashion. In fact, in the first decade of the 15th century, John Barton wrote a Donne Francus, that is a treatise intended for adults who wished to learn French language, which means by this time people did not learn language, that is French, as a mother tongue. Rather, they had to make efforts for that, and they needed books or manuals for that. It is also interesting to note the three reasons that he gives for Englishmen learning this French language are the following. He says that there was nothing as such in terms of communication that was required, but the first reason for why they needed to learn French through the kind of manuals that he offered, that it would enable them to communicate with their neighbors of the neighbor realm, France. So, it was for the first time perceived as a language that would be restricted only to talk to or to communicate with the foreigners. The second reason that he gives is that the law in England was largely in French language. So in order to understand law and the legal proceedings, it was important for people associated with it in specific and other people in general to know or to understand French. And the third reason that he gives is that gentlemen and women willingly write to each other in French language. So, as per choice, the nobility would sometimes write in French language instead of English. Now, as far as the first reason is concerned, interacting with or communicating with the neighbors, that is the people from other nations, especially the French neighbors, this reason is still valid, and that is still used in England to communicate with the French people. The second and the third reasons. The second reason, that is the language of the court being a language that was used in the court, and the third reason, that is, where gentlemen and women would willingly write in that. Both of the reasons have become a part of history, and there is no testimony as such that French language is any more used in these ways. However, during the 15th century and after that, French language still had a prestige and a status, a certain position attached to it, because for such a long time it had been marked as a language of privilege, as a language of nobility. This led towards French language retaining its position as a language of culture. It emerged and had a strong position during this time as a language of fashion. So, the nobility, the royalty, the upper class, the aristocracy, they would use it as a part of their style, as a part of fashion. This was the language that would be used as a language of sophistication. So, The people who would like themselves to be known in the upper social class circles as more sophisticated people, as more civilized people, as more fashionable people, as, people of style, they would use French language. This feeling was further strengthened in the 18th century, and even today we find that in the minds of many of the people, the French language is associated with style and fashion.